Hey there tech fans, Rick here again from Drone Valley. In today's clip, I'd like to show you a new mounting kit for the Osmo Action that allows you to use your camera with the Osmo Mobile 3. Now if you're a fan of the channel, you might remember back to a few months ago when the Mobile 3 first came out, and I got a ton of questions from you guys asking me, Rick, I own the Osmo Action. How can I mount that in my Osmo Mobile 3 to take advantage of the mechanical stabilization? And I thought, man, that is a great question because the Osmo Action has incredibly good digital image stabilization. But if I add to that the 3-axis stabilization that this provides mechanically, I'm going to have an incredibly stable picture. So I thought, well, this is an easy question to answer, and I could not have been more wrong because when I started searching for a bracket that would fit this to actually mount it in the Mobile 3, I went on a wide search with all the brands that are out there and I bought a ton of them. I reached out to my manufacturing contacts and said, send me all the brackets you've got. And I must have tested 20 or 25 of these brackets from name brands that actually said they'd work with the Osmo Action, and it turns out none of them work. They were all just terrible failures for a bunch of different reasons. And I actually put a clip together to warn you guys not to buy a bracket like this to try to use it with the Osmo Action, and I said I would continue to hunt for one that would actually work, and I finally found it. Now, there are 4 reasons that you can't use a GoPro bracket with the Osmo Action, and I'll go through them quickly. I did a whole clip on it if you want to get all the dirty details, but essentially 3 of the problems have to do with the camera mounting to the bracket. The 4th one has to do with the bracket mounting to the actual Mobile 3. The 3 problems you've got with trying to mount the camera over are all based on the fact that they're different size cameras, and these brackets are made specifically for the GoPro product. So if you look at them side by side, this is a lot wider and it's a lot shorter. If the bracket is made to fit this won't fit in there. So the cutout is wrong. The bracket that holds it in there is too shallow. And even if you were one of those guys that wanted to MacGyver this and took the bracket off and used some gaffing tape and some cable ties and, I don't know, some barbed wire to hold it on there, you still have the problem of balancing it because the bracket is made with a certain amount of weight over here to offset the weight of the GoPro to keep that balanced in the handle of the gimbal. And the problem is that even though it is close in weight, you could typically slide it across to find a perfectly balanced point, but the way this holds, and this is the 4th reason it won't work, the way this holds the actual bracket, there are fingers that come down to grab your phone. Those fingers hit this metal weight here, so you can't really slide it too far. So the whole thing was a mess, and I'm not saying I didn't have people send me videos that said, hey, we got it working, you know, with a hacksaw and some gaffing tape, but I can't do that. I really want to have a bracket that if I'm using this on my selfie stick, which I do most of the times, or in the extension handle, I want to pop it off there, pop it on my gimbal in a couple of seconds. I don't want to waste a half an hour trying to cable tie stuff and zip tie things on there. So this bracket solves all those problems for you. And essentially, it's a really nice little kit. It's got 4 basic parts. It's got a few extra weights that are in the handle as well. You're going to want to put all the weights in the handle because that'll balance it perfectly for the Osmo Mobile 3. But in essence, what you've got is a bracket. You've got a collar that fits over the camera to hold it in, and 1 screw. And then we also include a sun shield. But the way this works, it couldn't be simpler. You basically take the camera and drop it down inside this cutout. Now the cutout's got a nice little rubber ring on the inside, and that helps to secure the camera and prevents it from scratching. One of the problems I have with a lot of the brackets for the GoPro is they were just machined aluminum, and every time you put the camera in it and took it out, you're scratching the surface of it, and I don't like to do that. So having the rubber ring in there was really important. So you lay the camera inside there, you slide the collar over the top of the camera, and then you put 1 screw in the back. You don't have to fiddle with 2 screws, it's just 1 simple screw. And again, another problem I had with a lot of those brackets were the thread, the top part of the screw that you actually put your fingers on was really small and it was hard to grip and you couldn't get it tight. This one tightens up really nicely, so you can see that it's not shaking loose. And then we include a sun collar that you can pop on the camera as well if you want like that, and that keeps the sun from washing across the screen. It's a really nice little addition. Now to install this in the Mobile 3, it's a very simple process. If you look closely at it, there are kind of indents along here that match up perfectly with those fingers. So you're going to want to make sure when you put it in, the camera's facing down like this, and you'll want to make sure that they fit in the fingers perfectly. So you'll feel it click in there, and I'll show you that in a second. I'll put it offset first, and then I'll slide it in all the way so you can feel it. Click. Let me try and slide it up a little bit. Now listen closely. Here, click. So when it's in there, it's clicked in like that. And that's all you pretty much have to do. So just let it sit there, turn it on, just like you would with your phone in it. A couple of seconds, it'll come up, and it'll go into landscape mode, and you're good to go. Now if you want to go to portrait mode, you double click the button, and it comes down. And you can actually move the camera around, no issues whatsoever. You can slide the sun shield on the front of it if you want. Now, one thing I do have to point out though is obviously when you're using your phone, it connects to the unit, so you have some control over what happens with the phone starting recording, stopping recording. With this, you're basically just turning the camera on and taking advantage of the gimbal stabilization. So there isn't a lot of control from the handle that you can do to the actual camera. All you can do is move it around, but you get some really nice pan shots with this. And if you're walking, it makes a huge difference. Now, I thought, okay, now that we've got it mounted, that's one of the problems. The second question, again, as an engineer, I got to ask this. just because I can do it doesn't mean I should do it, right? So the fact that I can now do it, did it really make a difference? Does it make enough of a difference to go through this hassle of taking the beautiful Osmo Action stabilization, slapping it in the Osmo Mobile 3, and does it add enough value to it, is I guess what I'm getting at. So I took it outside and I tested it. And I did 2 tests. One's an extreme test and one is a normal test of things you're going to do as a terrestrial creature, which is the one you probably care more about. But I'll show you those next and then I'll come back with some final comments. But it works well, it holds it well. Let's just see how well it does to stabilize the footage. I'm outside for a quick field test of the Osmo Action adapter for the Osmo Mobile 3. And I was thinking about this a lot yesterday on how best to show you the difference of having your Osmo Action mounted in the Osmo 3 makes for stabilization. Now we all know the Osmo Action has phenomenal digital stabilization, but I'd like to think that by putting it in a 3-axis gimbal, it would improve it even more. And I know a lot of you had questions about that. So I could just take it out and walk around a field like this, and I'll head down to the lake in a little bit, some gravel down there and some hills and stuff, and I'll give you an idea what it looks like when you're walking with it. But I wanted to take it to the next level, and I thought, what better way to really test this thing than to strap it on the front of my car and actually drive down the road with it to see what kind of stabilization we can get. Now I haven't tested this, so that could very well just fly off there and we'll get some amazing footage, but I'm hoping it sticks, and I'll drive it down the road with the Osmo Action in the Osmo Mobile 3 first to show you what that looks like, and then I'll actually have the Osmo Action mounted on a selfie stick and drive down again so we can compare the two. Now again, I have no idea how this is going to go, so it'll be really exciting, so stay tuned. That test was a whole lot of fun to do, and I was on pins and needles the whole time thinking that camera's going to pop off and come flying back at my windshield, and that's going to be a mess for me. But anyway, did you notice the difference between the Osmo Action on its own and the Osmo Action inside the Osmo Mobile 3? You didn't? That's because there was none, and it was an epic fail. I really thought that I would strap that to the front of the car, go driving down the road, bumping all over the place, and I would have a lot of shake on the Osmo Action and no shake with the Osmo Mobile 3. And to me, they both look pretty much the same. And I know that seems foolish to do the test and then show you that it didn't make a big difference, but that's how science works. You got to do tests, and if it doesn't work, you got to show the results as well. Now, why didn't it work? Well, honestly, I really thought it would make a huge difference, but when I think about it more, the car acts like a stabilized gimbal in some respects because you've got shock absorbers that are picking up all the bumps in the road. You've got air in the tires, which tends to cushion those bumps. So yeah, it's not going to make a huge difference. Even though the thing's shaking side to side, it's not designed to handle those kind of really quick shakes. It's the big movement shakes that this thing will help with. So the next test, which again, I haven't reviewed yet, is me walking around with the Osmo Action, because normally you're not going to be strapping this thing to the front of your car or your drone. You're going to be walking around with it. So I think the real test for terrestrial creatures like us is to walk around with it, see what it looks like with the Osmo Action alone, and then put it inside the Osmo Mobile 3, and let's see if it makes a big difference. So stay tuned for that next. Okay, this is the Osmo Action, just on a selfie stick, walking downhill. A little bit of rough terrain here, getting into some sand, and I think the image stabilization is pretty good on this. In a second, we'll compare it to the new Osmo Action mount for the Osmo Mobile 3. Okay, now we've got it mounted in the Osmo Action adapter for the Osmo Mobile 3. Same hill, same terrain. And when I get back to the shop, we'll compare them to see if it's any more stable. I imagine it is because of the 3-axis gimbal. But that's the Osmo Action in the adapter on the Mobile 3. Okay, that made a huge difference. And to me, watching that footage is almost like I was flying a drone, because it had 3-axis stabilization going on that was just incredibly smooth. And I'm telling you, I didn't do anything funky. It wasn't like I was, jerking it around when I was walking down with the Osmo Action and then really careful when I walked down the hill with the Mobile 3. I really did the same path. I walked the same way. I held it as still as I could to reduce the amount of wobble in the picture. And you can see the big difference between them. Now, maybe you're more stable on your feet than I am. I'm getting a little older, so I tend to wobble a little bit. But that Mobile 3 took all the wobble out of that picture, and I just can't get over the difference it made. So for me, I own the Osmo Action, I own the Osmo Mobile 3. The bracket is a good buy because it allows me to use the camera with the Mobile 3. Now, I'm not telling you, go out and buy an Osmo Action, buy the Osmo Mobile 3 and buy the bracket, because if you want to do that, you can just buy an Osmo Pocket and you'll pretty much get everything. But if you own these two products, that bracket's going to really make it easy for you to use the Osmo Action with your Osmo Mobile 3. Now, having said all that, I have a link below if you want to go check this product out. I love doing these kind of clips, and and I felt like I left that one unanswered. When I did that search for the bracket, couldn't find one that worked. I really wanted to spend some time and try and find one. I think we finally found one. It's reasonably priced, it's really easy to use, and it just solves the problem. So that's pretty much it for today. If you have any questions about anything I've covered, let me know. Drop them in the comments below. I'll get back to you. I love putting these kind of clips together, and when you guys throw a challenge at me like this, I'm not giving up till I figure it out one way or the other. So problem solved. There you go. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, happy flying.